US-Africa relations going forward. Indeed, Africa has had quite close relations with the United States for decades, starting from the period of decolonization. America had not been a part of the Berlin Conference. The European powers had gone and split up Africa amongst themselves. And so when the struggle for liberation began, America morally was supportive of the process of decolonization in Africa, and that was a good thing. And so after independence, naturally, a lot of African countries, had a very good relation with the United States of America. And in Ghana particularly, it resulted in a strong partnership in terms of infrastructure development. The Akosombo Dam, came out of the relations between the United States and Ghana. And that was followed by the friendship between President Nkrumah and Kaiser, which led to the establishment of the Volta Aluminium Company, which for a very long time was the leading state-owned enterprise in Ghana. And so we have that history. And since then, successive governments from President Reagan, President Bush I, Bush II, President Clinton especially, President Obama, have seen various strong initiatives aimed at Africa. AGWA, the African Growth Opportunities Act, the MCC, the Millennium Challenge Compact, Feed the Future, the agricultural initiatives. Power Africa. These are all major initiatives that were directed at Africa and have seen quite some tremendous advancements in terms of all the sectors that they were targeted at. In Ghana particularly, we've had 2 Millennium Challenge Compacts. The first one targeting the agricultural sector and covering many things under that sector, including improvement in roads to be able to move agricultural produce from the rural areas to the urban markets. The second one targeting the power sector, which we're still implementing, which would improve efficiency in power generation and distribution in Ghana. And so that relationship has been good historically. And generally, America enjoys a lot of support and admiration in Africa. If you talk to the average African, they have a very soft feeling towards America and world affairs. The problem began when Mr. Trump emerged. Of course, if you took a survey across the continent, I'm sure that there was more support for Hillary than Mr. Trump, naturally. One, because of her husband's tenure in office. He had a very, strong affinity for Africa. And secondly, because she herself, as Secretary of State, had, worked tirelessly towards crafting the Obama administration's policies towards Africa. So generally, there was the hope that Hillary would win. But come Mr. Trump won. And we didn't despair. We hope that, once in office, the rough edges will be smoothened so that he would become a good friend of Africa. Unfortunately, friends of America are beginning to despair, not wholly because of the invective he used on us, but of course that put off a lot of people. I think it was most unfortunate. But also because there are, like you yourself mentioned, almost 2 years into his administration, no substantive senior officer dealing with African affairs, and no substantive Secretary of State for Africa. That's a position that has always been filled fairly quickly, and whoever is appointed begins that, role of making the relationship as close as possible. And like you yourself said, very few high-level visits, and the anticlimax of Secretary of State Tillerson being fired when he was airborne somewhere in Africa didn't go down very well with a lot of us. But aside from that, the danger is U.S. is losing its leadership and relationship, not only with Africa, but with much of the world. U.S. has been the leading world power, and most of the world has looked up to the U.S. in times of crisis. That appears to be changing. President Trump, when he was inaugurated, said, "America first." And I guess that's what he is living up to. But what you do is you abdicate soft power, and there's no price or value you can put on that soft power. If you're going to be methodical and transactional in dealing with your relationships with the rest of the world, then you lose the value of that soft power that everybody has had, always looking to America when there's been, issues to deal with. And so that's one of the problems. Another is trustworthiness. I mean, everybody's beginning to despair whether it's worth entering into an agreement with America. Right now, Kim Jong-un is negotiating with President Trump. I mean, what if tomorrow somebody gets elected and tears up that agreement? That is a major concern. I mean, the whole world came together and fashioned out the climate change agreement. I mean, you should have seen the excitement. I was there, and when the agreement was signed, I mean, we all gave a standing ovation. Everybody was happy, held hands together. And just one change of administration, and America, which was one of the major prime movers in helping get this agreement, walks away from the agreement. And so any agreements that are signed, what is their value in terms of, America sticking to those agreements? I mean, look at the Iran nuclear deal. You might not like it, it's not perfect, but in the circumstances, it was the best that could be negotiated. You might want to improve it, but to just tear it up and walk away, what guarantees that Kim Jong-un have that if he reaches agreement on denuclearization, tomorrow America will not walk away from the agreement? These are all questions that everybody is asking, and I think that that is something that we need to look at. But what is more worrisome now even is America is quarreling with its traditional allies. I mean, I can't understand what's happening between America and Canada, and NAFTA. Mexico, you say that Mexico has a trade imbalance of $60 billion with America. But that $60 billion has resulted in a net reduction in migration of Mexicans into the US because more jobs are being created in Mexico now, and so they prefer to stay back home and not try to cross into America. And so, yes, there might be a trade imbalance of $60 billion, but what is the net effect in terms of cutting down migration and people trying to cross over? Recently, President Buhari went to the United States, and President Trump told him there's a trade deficit between US and Nigeria. And so that deficit must be balanced. I mean, what's Nigeria going to do? Nigeria exports oil. And so because you buy oil from Nigeria, yes, your imports from Nigeria are higher. But what's Nigeria's capacity to import more American goods in? Those are the things you must look at. And the point is that trade deficit is assisting Nigeria to continue to build up its capacity to be a country where its people can live in prosperity and dignity. And so if you ask Nigeria to address the trade imbalance, I just don't understand, what really President Trump wanted to say. But we don't despair. There are people like you who will continue to speak out, and I hope that continue to influence, America's foreign policy in a way that it realizes that not everything is transactional, and that there are some things, that give you a certain advantage and a certain lead that you cannot put monetary value to. But we'll continue to work together with America. We're implementing the Millennium Challenge Compact, and I hope that that will go well. And I'm sure that some of the other programs that exist already, Africa would also be able to take advantage of them so that we can create a better life for our people. But I must say, all in all, Africa, as you said, is a continent that is changing and changing very fast. From being seen as a basket case before, some of the fastest growing economies are in Africa now. And if you see some of what is going on in many of our countries, you can tell that, there is good hope that we can turn things around. Of course, we have the problem of expanding population to deal with, but like we said, it can be an advantage or a disadvantage depending on how we utilize those growing populations to be able to increase productivity and be able to move our countries forward. So I want to thank you. Very insightful speech, and I'm sure that when the questions come, there'll be more for you to address. Thank you very much.